In the past 6 months, the people of Burling, both near and far, have been very generous in sharing their memories of the stores of the East Side, sometimes in film, like this gem of a clip of Syl Morissette's store that Mallory Patry provided. Or photos like this one of Holly's Market, with Alfred Holly on the left and his two sons to his right. Alfred is the inventor of Holly's sausage, which we now all know today as Blanchette's sausage. And of course there have been stories, like Henry Turgeon, who worked as a stockboy at Holly's making 50 cents a week, when Jeanette LeBlanc, a neighborhood girl, walked into the store for the first time and caught his eye. It took him 7 years to muster up the courage to ask her out on a date, but they're now still married and living in southern Florida. Jeanette was also connected to another store in the last episode that I knew very little about. She's a relative of Albin LeBlanc, who ran a store out of this building on the corner of Burgess and Merrimack. Before the LeBlancs, it was run by Amédée and Alphonsine McGuinness in the 20s. When I hear these names, I don't know these people, but I know folks who have those last names, and sometimes I imagine that perhaps they're related, and somehow it makes me feel closer to the people I grew up with, even if I had never talked with them. I've also learned about stores that I didn't know existed, like Le Magasin de Monsieur Martin, which is said to have been located on Burgess Street, just beyond Grafton, though at the moment I have no idea what side of Grafton it would have been on, but maybe you do. Bob Goyette pointed out that a local clergyman by the name of Maurice Filion wrote about it in his book Priest.
It's when you wake up and you're glad that you're breathing. It's when you wake up and you're glad that you're living. Well, that's another more.
But there were perhaps some stories I could have done without, like the large bucket of live eels that used to sit out in front of Oreste Mosca's shop. Kick it!
Sweet home, Burling, New Hampshire, where the skies are so blue. Sweet home, Burling, New Hampshire, Lord, I'm coming home to you. That's the truth.
Hey folks, welcome to the second episode of the Burling Store History Tour, an online tour of the grocery and corner stores of Burling, New Hampshire. My name is Shawn Marquis. I'm a native of Burling. I graduated from Burling High School in 1992 and then moved away to Boston for about 25 years and happily returned back to the area in 2018. This episode is particularly special to me because we're covering the neighborhood that I grew up in, the Norwegian Village. And from time to time, you're going to find that I'm going to stray a little bit from corner and grocery stores and bring a little attention to other establishments. But I'm just trusting that if you're watching this show, you might love Burling as much as I do, and you'll be down for the ride. So with this episode, we're going to be looking at 17 different locations, 12 of which were stores. And the last time we were together here, we left off on the east side, so let's pick it up from there. So our first stop takes us to Napert Village, which is half the size of what it once was, to 1422 Hutchins Street. And this was a building that went by a few names over the years. I have evidence of it being called Emmanuel's, the Village Store, Frank's, and Gauthier's, though I've been corrected on my pronunciation of that, and I've been told that it's not Gauthier's, but it's Gauthier's, which makes me want to say, hey, I'm going to pick up some scratch tickets and a six-pack down at Gauthier's. You folks can let me know, is it Gauthier's or is it Gauthier's? It's probably both. I've positioned the map view here because it matches a photo that I came across of the store that was taken about from this spot. In this picture that you're seeing, the store would have stood just a few feet beyond where the car is positioned. The road at that time didn't go straight ahead. You actually had to take that right and turn into the village, or you would have run smack dab into the store, which you can see here. This was a really busy location. There was a convenience store with a deli, and in my research, I found some pretty lively debate over who had the best Italian sandwiches in the city. Some people claim it's the Village Store, while others argued, the Submarine Shop on White Street. There was no clear winner in that discussion, but it sure made me hungry for an Italian. The store was run by Emmanuel and Lorraine Gauthier Gochi for 22 years. They had 3 kids, and I was actually in touch with their daughter Jane, who said that she spent a lot of time in the store because they all had lots of chores there to do every day. Frank Dumenel bought the store from the Gauthiers around 1980 and was really remembered fondly by folks from what I saw online. Deborah Bousquet, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name right, wrote, "My dad won the 50-50 pot they used to draw on Fridays twice. We used to stop there after working in our garden at Brown Farm back when the rec department would rent spaces there. And our dad would treat us to a Moxie or a Jick Jack raspberry soda. And sometimes Frank Dumenel would treat us to a free ice cream treat. Terrific memories." So there you have it with the Village store. So next up, we'll slide down Hutchins to the Liberty Park neighborhood, which was a bit of a new name to me. I didn't realize that this area town was actually called Liberty Park. Apparently, the streets are named in relation to either World War I with Mainsborough, Verdun, Reims, or Argonne, or were named after Brown Company with Wood, Bermico, and Bemis streets. You can see where we're standing here. Over in the corner would have been Morris Building Center. Down this road would take you to the Bridge Street Bridge. And from what I found, there was only one store in this neighborhood, and it was right here at 134 Bridge Street. Though maybe you folks can help me out with this. I've been finding myself wondering if there was ever a convenience store in Liberty Gardens, which is now known as Brookside Park. If you've got anything on that, let me know. So this store was known as Liberty Market, or later on as Eastie's Corner Market. I did manage to find a photo here. There are a number of different folks who are attributed to running this place, and some of this might be wrong, so by all means, please correct me if that's the case. Bob Jutras and George Crotto, Louise and Claire Ramsey, Richard and Barbara Bouchard, Maurice Caron and Jerry Paye, Robert and Floette Huot, somebody by the last name of Seguin, and then Don Eastman. I remember in the late 70s and early 80s that the sidewalks here were quite high off the street. And while the photo here shows the building as being painted white, I believe later that it actually had green siding. Henry Turgeon remembers that this store had a McCaskey file system to track their customer credit. And a McCaskey file was like a case that flipped open, and customer receipts would be separated in rows and held in place with a spring mechanism. This store also served as a bus stop for local kids going to school, and at one point later on, it may have been a laundromat. The one remaining photo that I have of this location is of the former owners, George Crotto and Robert Jutras. I think Robert's on the right. So unless anybody else has any other stores to make note of that I've missed, I think that pretty much covers all of the businesses on the east side. So with that being the case, let's head over the bridge and make our way up the west side. So here we are at 823 Main Street, home of a number of businesses over the years: Valancourt's Red and White, Olfeen's, Sampson's, Kelly's Food Market, and Clarkie's. Valancourt's began as a small market in 1938, opened by Alcide Harry Valancourt, who's pictured here. And if folks remember going into this store, if you walked in and then went straight past all the cashiers to the opposite side of the building, there was this little slope that took you into a small room where the cat food and other housewares were kept. And I believe that this room was the extent of the original store, which is pictured here. You can also note on the outside of the building this entrance that faced Fagan's Pub, which would have taken you right into that little small room. Mr. Valancourt expanded the store by 6 times its original size. And if you can see to the right of the building, there's actually a house and a tree there. There's no parking lot. And so Alcide went ahead and undertook this large project to actually move a house in order to make space for the parking lot that you see there today. And the custom at this location throughout the years was that you would go in, you'd do your shopping, you'd pay for your groceries, and then you'd jump in your car and drive it under this carport that's still there today, while baggers would actually load all the groceries into your car for you. Alcide was actually an employee at the Holly and Sons Market, which we covered earlier in this program, as was Gene Turgeon, who you can see here in this next picture. Gene was the meat manager, and folks who have ever been in the store will remember the long meat freezer that spanned the entire back of the store. And apparently it wasn't uncommon in the meat department, and definitely in other shops that butchered meat, to have sawdust on the ground to absorb the moisture, which folks remember as being the case in this store. Bob Goyette told me that each week they'd have a drawing at this store, I think on Fridays, where you'd actually have to be at the store in order to win the prize when they announced it. So folks would line up on the side streets all around Valancourts at that time, and they would listen on loudspeakers as they made the announcement of who the winner was that week. So Alcide opened multiple locations. There was this one, then there was another in Groveton, and then there was a third on the corner of 3rd and Madigan, possibly where the store of Belly's once was. It changed names over the years, Sampson's, Clarkey's, Kelly's, but some of the faces stayed the same. I saw a post that was suggesting that a woman named Elaine Frechette had logged 32 years in that building. And I also wanted to make mention of a gentleman by the name of Larry Charest, who's kind of dear to my heart, and he was the manager here at Kelly's for a time. Larry was my upstairs neighbor over on Sweden Street, and he was just a really sweet guy. He was known in my neighborhood for taking his bike to the top of Sweden Hill near 10th Street, and in the middle of winter, he'd pedal his ass down as fast as he could, and he'd drive straight into a snowbank so it would throw him over the handlebars and into a huge drift of soft snow. It was totally fun to watch. He was such a kind spirit, and when you walked into Kelly's, I feel like you felt that. And sadly, he passed away in a fire in 1997, but he really was a hell of a guy and well worth the mention here. The store eventually closed down maybe in the early 90s and became the Hope Recovery Center, which unfortunately also closed down over the last year. So from here, we're going to move up the road to our next location. So this vantage point provides us a perspective that matches a photo from back in the day, where you can see here on the left-hand side is the Brown Company House, and on the right now is Heritage Park. But back in the day, this is the site of maybe the first store, or at least one of the first stores ever in Burling, called the Winslow Company Store. In 1852, Hezekiah Winslow was a sea captain from Portland, Maine, and he opened a sawmill with a group of folks and followed that up the next year by building a boarding house, which became the Brown Company House, and on the left side of your screen, and then also a store on the right side of your screen known as the Winslow Company Store. W.W. Brown eventually bought the house from Winslow and named it the Brolin Mills Company Store. And then later in 1917, it became what is maybe most famously known as for being the Brown Company Store. Employees of Brown Company could buy items at the store and have the expenses taken directly out of their paychecks. And the building had multiple floors. They carried groceries, furniture, clothing, hardware, and had a fleet of horse-drawn carriages, at least back in the earlier days, to bring goods back to their homes. The Winslow store probably began doing that. And apparently you could buy an entire barrel of flour, which employees would carry up into your home, even if you lived 3 stories up. After the store closed in 1945, the building became Ware Knitters of New Hampshire until the late 60s. And then lastly, it had become Milan Footwear Company. and then the company shut down in 1974, and the building was demolished that year. This photo here is of a display at the Moffett House in Burling that is actually a piece of the building that somebody retrieved. One fun fact about this location is that the road to the right of the Brown Company house, now known as Heritage Street, was roughly the area where the first ski jump was ever constructed in Burling. It was said to be a pretty crude jump that was built by stacking brush on top of the mill's dynamite shack. Good stuff. Okay, let's head a little further up the road here. So here's where I deviate a little bit from the store list, as I wanted to call out the Burling All-Star Dairy, a local producer who sold a number of dairy products, including 50 different flavors of ice cream. The dairy was founded by a gentleman by the name of Lionel Roy. He was not only the founder of this business, but also of the Northland Dairy Bar, which is still now in operation. And Lionel sadly passed away in November of 2020. Lionel appears to have been a really savvy entrepreneur, as he went on later to sell this dairy to Hershey's, and then from there founded the famous Balsam Spring Water Company. We have a few photos here. This is Lionel's son Peter, who runs the Northland Dairy Bar with his wife Joanne. Also here, rocking some cream coffee fudge ice cream there. And then folks might remember these wrappers from back in the day, and it may put a smile on your face. These were a few of the famous ice cream products. The Big Bar, which was a big vanilla block of ice cream covered in a hard shell of chocolate. The Big Lunch, which was a big ice cream sandwich. You could barely get the thing in your mouth. And then the Big Sherb, which was, again, kind of hard shell chocolate over sherbet, orange sherbet ice cream, I believe. So that's the Burling All-Star Dairy for you. As another fun fact here on the journey before I get to the next store, I thought I'd call out the VFW. And most folks may not know, but the VFW was actually the site of the first kindergarten that was ever in Burling. The area where the parking lot is and the right side of the building actually served as the playground for the kids. It was all fenced in at one point. There's a great picture down at the Moffett House where you can find that. So moving on to the next location, we're going to go behind the VFW around the corner onto Norway Street. So this location I actually have very little information about, though I do feel like I have a memory of it as a kid, which means it would have been opened in the 70s still. It's at 8 Norway Street. You could see here we have Iceland Street, which might have been known as 6th Street at one point. And if you look to your left, you'll see the St. Paul Lutheran Church up there. I did find information that suggested this place was called Norway Street Market. In the mid-50s, Walter Bushy was the proprietor. I found a 1956 yearbook ad, and they also had sponsored a Burling Rec Department basketball league back in the 50s. In later years, there's a suggestion that a gentleman by the name of Axel Johnson owned it, and that it possibly sold bread at one point, like it was like a day-old bread shop. Here's the ad that I had found in the yearbook back in the day, and if anybody has any information or photos, would love to hear from you on this location. When it came to detailing the stores of the Norwegian village, one of the stores I was most excited about was covering this location at 1219 Main Street. This was famously known as Russ Olson's Variety, and to some it was known as Ben Richards' store. It was first owned and operated by Elsie Olson, who unfortunately I couldn't find really much information about, other than eventually she sold the store to Ben Richards. Ben sold groceries, Head and Heart brand skis, parkas, hats, fishing gear, and ran a soda fountain that specialized in lemon lime slushies. Linda LaPlante remembers her dad taking her down to Ben's for ice cream at the counter, which ran along the right side of the store when you entered. And Ben was apparently a really generous guy. I came across a story about some kids who really wanted skis badly for Christmas, but the parents just didn't have the money to cover the expense. So Ben let their mother take the skis home before they were fully paid for and allowed her to pay them over time in installments. And Ben was not only a friend to the children, he was a friend to the adults as well. And word has it, back in the day of the blue laws where you couldn't buy booze on Sundays, that, if you were a regular customer of the store, you could roll in there on a Sunday and roll out with a paper bag of whatever you needed in it. So a friend to all was Ben Richards. Bobby Goyette remembers an amusement machine inside where you would drop a penny in the top of the device and it would bounce its way down over pins, kind of like Plinko, if you've ever seen that on The Price is Right. And if your penny landed in the right slot at the bottom, you would win a candy bar or whatever the prize was that day. Ben later went on to open Ben's Ski Shop over on Hutchins Street, which was the go-to place to rent skis in the area in my day. Elsie at the time must have still owned the store because she later sold it to her nephew Russ Olson, who went on to own it for 25 years. And this was during the time that I was living in the Norwegian village, and I have really fond memories of Russ, who was quite a character. Russ had served in the Army and later worked at Chase Manhattan Bank in New York City. He loved sports, and I remember him talking about taking trips to Atlantic City to enjoy the nightlife there. And I suspect he really enjoyed boxing because it seemed like every time us kids would walk in there, he'd slap you 6 ways from Sunday before you could even get hello out. He was like Muhammad Ali. He would lay this lightning quick combination on you, and you'd stand there in a stupor for a minute. But it was all in good humor. To give you a sense of the store at that time, when you walked in, there was a payphone mounted right to the right on the wall, back in the day of payphones. The days of payphones. And to the right, there was like a nook of dusty practical stuff that folks didn't really generally seem to need because they never got sold. To the left was his magazine rack, which I'm sure the gentlemen remember well, given the periodicals that Russ carried. And then Russ's counter was in the center of the store to the right, which he usually had a small TV perched up behind him, airing whatever sporting event was available on the 13 channels that we had back then. Across from him was a rack of VHS rentals and penny candy on the right if you went further into the store, chips on the left, beer cooler in the back, soft drinks one aisle over to your left. And like many of the stores back in the day, they had a weekly 50-50 raffle where locals would throw $1 into the pot and see if their name was drawn on Fridays. Russ's brother Dave worked at the store, who was a bit more reserved and a bit less freewheeling, I'd say, than Russ, as well as Steve Roy. Steve Roy also worked at this business. His nickname, he was known as Fats. And I really have a soft spot in my heart for Fats. He was the father of a couple of neighborhood friends, Tad and Heath Roy. And he was really like one of the very few people in my life who strongly encouraged me to follow my love of playing music. I remember I have a vivid memory of standing at the counter one day and buying something. And he said, "Are you still playing music, Shawn?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Good. Don't give up on your dreams. Do what makes you happy." And that might seem like a small moment, but as an impressionable young teen, that small exchange that took place in the span of a minute was really big for me. He was one of the few people that noticed that I had a passion for music, and he watered it. He was really a lovely guy. Sorry, I get a little emotional here, folks. Fats didn't have an easy life. He was stricken with polio very young, spent his youth in a wheelchair, and he really, really loved sports and got involved in any way he can as a kid. Usually he was coaching or managing high school teams. All right, compose yourself, Shawn. Olson's in general was really supportive of local sports in various ways. He sponsored a local men's rec basketball league team. Here's Russ with my dad basking in a tournament win. The name of the team were the Olson Varieties Peanut Kings because Russ sold roasted peanuts kind of much like they did back at Woolworths back in the day. And he also supported the, local kids playing sports, because that's where they would go to buy the classic pink rubber ball that everybody used to play fast pitch at Brown School with for 39 cents. If folks remember back in the day, there seemed to always be a strike zone painted on the wall of the newer wing of Brown School, where batters would try to smack the ball over the fence towards the Bridge Street Bridge. Back in the day when there was a car dealership there used to be a big Ford Motor Company sign that would loom over the store next to Brown School. And the kids used to kind of consider it to be the big, like, Citgo sign down at Fenway Park. They try to wrap the ball off of it. So after Russ moved on from his store, it was sold to Debbie Lemire in 1998. Where she ran it for a while. You notice the new signage there, kind of making a point of the Norwegian village and taking pride of the heritage of the neighborhood. And the store was then later sold to Reagan Burlock, who opened up Floral Designs by Reagan, which she's created such a wonderful energy in that space. And we're so lucky to have her there. You can see it here in this photo. Reagan runs a great business. If you ever need flowers, highly recommend her. Just one additional point, a point that really blew my mind when it came back in my memory. I don't remember who jarred it, but out front of this store, there used to be 2 gas pumps that stood directly on the sidewalk in front of the entrance. There was also a split rail fence to the right and left of the store, and this was really like the place where teenagers congregated in the evenings. The gas pumps never worked, so I think they really just kind of served as furniture for the teenagers. And there would be a congregation here, but there would also be a congregation down the street at Mel's Pool Hall, which in my research, Mel's Pool Hall would have been located here where the River's Edge sign is. I don't have too much. I didn't really dive too deep into my research on Mel's Pool Hall, but I did find this awesome photo of what it was back in the day. It was called Hanson's Restaurant, though whenever I ever mentioned Hanson's Restaurant, everybody kind of looked at me funny, and they would always say, that wasn't Hanson's Restaurant, that was Hanson's Beer Joint. The only reason that they had food there was to be able to carry their liquor license or whatever it was. So I found that really cool photo. It's a little blurry, but you can kind of get a sense of what the energy was there. Now, before we move further up the road, I want to take a quick left here and head up to the corner of Denmark and 7th Street to 106 7th Street, where at one point in this empty lot here on the corner stood the Star Bakery. This bakery began to operate in 1907 and employed 10 local folks making their signature Star Cream bread for the people of Burling and beyond. I think Star Cream was made from a product made by Brown Company called Cream Crisp, which I've got a photo here of. And every time I come across this photo of the Star Bakery in the course of creating this program, I so wish that in my days of living in the Norwegian village that I could have just walked down the street to get a loaf of warm, crusty bread right out of the oven. And it just makes me feel like, boy, folks, we got to support our local farmers and food producers in this area. We really need them. For those of you who saw the last episode of this program, you might remember that there was a clip at the end about the Androscoggin Food Co-op. I've since joined the board of the co-op, and I would ask that if you're enjoying these programs and they've enriched your life in any way, the biggest thanks you could give to me is becoming a member of the co-op. It's a one-time $200 fee, so it's not annual. It's just one-time $200, and you become a part owner of a grocery store with a growing group of us in the community. Once we get to 1,000 members who join, we open a store. We buy from local farmers so that they can make a living. We offer good jobs to people in our community, and we get to enjoy good, fresh, nutritious food. And we're not talking about a shishi boutique sort of store. This would be affordable in the sort of products that you would normally find in your grocery store, complemented with the goods from local producers and farmers. The North Country is technically categorized as a food desert, and we're working to fix that. So thanks for hearing me out and for your consideration. Now let's get back to the stores. So this next location just takes us just down the street to Sweden Street with a store that I know nothing about. This is 106 Sweden Street. Seeing it as a kid, it always looked like a different kind of house. And I wouldn't have known that this would have been a grocery store if I hadn't found a fire map, a really old hand-drawn fire map, where you can see 106 Sweden. And inside the building, it says GRO, which from researching other grocery stores, I've come to realize that that denotes grocery. I don't know if anybody alive would still have information about this place, but if you happen to, by all means, please drop a line. Our next stop takes us back down to Main Street to 1279 Main. This was a business run by H. Christian Johnson. Don't know a whole lot here either. I know that the original business that he owned was located at 310 Main Street, which is the driveway to the right of Marshall Insurance. If you don't know where that is, that's kind of across from St. Anne's as you're making your way up Main Street. The H. Christian Johnson store, aside from the normal groceries and provisions, also seemed to be kind of the hot spot to go to get bus tickets to a number of different areas in New England. Our next stop just takes us slightly up the street here to 1299 Main Street for Genren's Market. This location was run by Beatrice and Leo Genren in the 1930s. And the only other information that I really know about this place is that Don Sloan, who is a huge contributor to this project, his mother, Sylvia Johnson, worked here at one point. Here's a beautiful photo of Genren's Market. I don't know if it was towards the end of their run. You can see some of the signs are taking a little bit of beating there in the window, but what a beautiful place. And again, just a short bit up the road here, we have another location at 1363 Main Street. This was originally the first location of an A&P grocery store in Burling. A&P was the largest groceries chain up until, I think, 1975. This location was built in 1928. It went through a number of different iterations. It was called Fanny's, which was run by Claude and Fanny Michaud, Berlin Mills Variety, Quirum's, which was run by Ray and Florence Quirum, Sunshine Variety, which was operated by Priscilla and Andre Berthiaume. Andre sadly passed away not too long ago in January of 2020. Caribou Country Store, which was run by Rick and Sue Taylor. And then finally, the River's Edge, run by George and Teresa Malloy. They bought it in 1997, refurbished the place, and sold it in 2012. This is another spot that's kind of near and dear to my heart. This was the site of my first job. I was working for Rick and Sue Taylor back when it was Caribou Country Store. I would stock the coolers, sweep and mop for an hour each night. When you walked in, the counter was on your right. The drink coolers spanned the entire left side of the room, and then there was a small deli in the back that had excellent chicken salad sandwiches. There were always at this location seemed to be worms and crawlers in the fridge there to the left, given a lot of people like to fish just across the street. Back in the time when it was owned by the Michauds, Bob Goyette told me a story of they used to have a sign in the front that said "Ici on parle français," which kind of kept him out of the store because he was thinking that maybe it said that they only speak French and not we also speak French. So his French wasn't so good at the time, so it kind of kept him out of there. Today, this is the site of Bergey's Trading Post that's owned by Jonathan Bergeron. He sells goods to local fishermen in the area, lures, bait, and equipment. And John's previous stint was as the on-site ranger up at the Milan Hill State Park. Now, another surprise I ran into in the course of researching for this program was through a conversation with Joan Halverson, when she told me about this kind of hot dog hamburger shack that once existed at the mouth of the Bridge Street Bridge on the Brown School side. I had never had heard of anything like this, and I had never had imagined a building standing in this place. But sure enough, through a little bit of digging, I found that indeed, at the end of the Bridge Street Bridge, there was a building which was actually the first location of Al's Steakhouse. Now, folks may remember Al's Steakhouse just before the Riches Plaza on the Burling Road. You kind of can't forget it with the big plastic cow that they had out front. I always wanted to jump on that thing and ride it. But this was the first location of Al's. Here's a little bit of a better close-up on it. And Al and his wife Loretta actually lived across the street in a house that would have sat kind of where the Brown School playground was before they built the new wing of Brown School. And Al's Steakhouse seems to be kind of famous for being open on the later side of things. So this would be the place to go after the bars let out and you're done dancing. If you wanted a good greasy hamburger, Al's seemed to be the place to get it. Now, just a few steps up the street is an intersection that I didn't realize had so much importance in the Norwegian village, but it certainly does, being the area where Boulanger's Market, or maybe it was even called Riverside Market, sat here where the new wing of Brown School sits, which is just the one-story wing of it. This place was owned by Arthur Boulanger, who I believe is the grandfather of the Legier family of Norway Street. The boys would be Dennis, Claude, Ron, Mike, and then a sister, Diane. Don Sloan and Barney Valier were very helpful in kind of helping paint the picture of what was going on here in this area. But there was a 3-story apartment building right on the corner. Next door, there was a house, and potentially after that, there was even another store. Alman Mullen and his wife lived, I believe, in the house to the left of the apartment building. And Boulanger's Market was situated here. Rumor has it that they had the best candy than any other location in town. And just behind it actually sat an ice skating rink on the corner of Norway and 8th. Now, I wasn't able to find a photo of Boulanger's itself, and I'm really looking to folks out there. I imagine there must be more information and photos of it that I would love to really get my hands on. But I did find some really great aerial views of this area of town that are taken across the Bridge Street Bridge from the top of a large wood pile when the mill operated lumber piles. There's like a conveyor that leads up to where this photo is being taken. So in this particular photo, you could see in the left-hand side, there's Gendron's Market at the very edge of the frame. And then if you come all the way to the right, you can see the houses that I was talking about. The new wing of Brown School hadn't even been built yet. I think there's a building just to the right of the two that are here. And then behind that, I think what we can see is the ice skating rink with a couple of kids playing in it. So definitely a different look for the front of Norwegian Village here back in the day. And obviously the bridge is running with that massive log truck making its way across. And then I have another photo where you can see the new wing of Brown School is being constructed. So Boulanger's would have been taken down by this point. The buildings that stood there had been demolished, and they're beginning to do work to set it up. And you can actually see the conveyor at the bottom of the frame that the logs are traveling up. So really cool aerial views of this area. So what else is significant about this intersection in the Norwegian Village is that it was also the beginning point of the Burling Street Railway. So you could actually jump on a rail car here at the corner of 8th and Main near Brown School and travel all the way down to Exchange Street in Gorham. There's a couple of cool photos that I managed to find of some of the rail cars. I'm not quite sure where this one is located on the route, but this one is pretty sure to be in front of Gorham Hardware making its way back. Now the railway began in 1902, ran from 1902 to 1938, and it was kind of cool that if you were at the Princess Theater watching a movie, there were actually lights inside the theater to let you know that the trolley was approaching, so you can jump out and catch your ride home. As most folks know, sadly, the Princess Theater was demolished just a few months ago. And so this takes us to the last stop on this edition of the tour. We're going to head up towards the 12th Street Bridge to this location at 1725 Riverside Drive. So much like the last episode of this program, where on the east side there was only one store left standing in operation as a grocery or convenience store, we find the same situation here with this episode. This is the last man standing, so to speak, of the 12 different locations that we covered as a part of this program. Historically, it's been a convenience store with a deli. It's gone by a number of names. It originally was built by Alf Halverson, who Alf is the grandfather of Scott Halverson, who's the person that is really behind the effort to restore the ski jump right now. Really just wonderful work that he's doing. But it was originally built by Alf, and it was run by somebody with the last name of Erickson in 1961, and they called it Eric's Groceries. And then it was called C&C's, which I believe is after the owners Clarence and Cecile Bork, who owned it for 6 years. And then it became Ron's Market, which I believe was run by Ronnie Cannavaro. I might have that wrong. You folks can help correct me on that one. Then it became Dresser's Market, and then Burling Mills Variety, which is what it's been called over the last few iterations. Other folks who had owned it, Robert and Elaine Couture, who I believe they sold it to Dale and Jill Pike. Melissa Johnson owned it. Mohanbhai Patel was the previous owner before somebody who just recently bought it, a gentleman by the name of Kennedy, who previously hailed from Danvers, Massachusetts. I don't have really any old photos or other information about this, but if you have anything, by all means, send it along as usual. So that wraps up another edition of the Burling Store History Tour. Thank you so much for tuning in, for your interest in this project. If there's information that I slipped up on along the way, or if you have additional information you'd want to share, please drop a line. You can email me at paperrockcity@gmail.com, because this is very much a living project. The graphics that you're seeing me use from Google Atlas will eventually be released to the public once I map the entire city. And then folks for generations will be able to come and explore these neighborhoods and see the photos and read the stories that I'm sharing with you here, so they can get a sense of what's been kicking in their neighborhood over the years. While I'm hesitant to list out all the people that I have to thank, because there's just so many that I would inevitably forget somebody, I really want to call out Walter and Jackie Netto over at the Burling Historical Society. They've been super helpful with this project, and they've just been great people to talk with. My next episode will cover the neighborhood of the Avenues. And again, if you wish to show your appreciation, the best way you can for me is to become a member of the Androscoggin Food Co-op. There'll be a short clip about it right after this segment here. So thank you so much, good people of the North Country and beyond. I hope you have a great day, and we'll catch you next time.
But if you want something sweet, give your mouth and eyes a treat. You don't have to go very far. Just go to the Northland Dairy Bar.
Hi, Peter Higg here for the Androscoggin Food Co-op. We're delighted to sponsor Shawn Marquis' continuing look back at the many locally owned grocery stores that were once a part of our Androscoggin Valley neighborhoods. In fact, we think it's time to return to the idea of a locally owned and locally controlled grocery store. But rather than several small stores owned by several local families, our goal is to open one full-service grocery store that will be owned by hundreds of local folks, including you and me. It'll be a store where you can get fresh, locally and regionally grown produce, a store that works directly with farmers and producers to give them a better deal by selling more directly to consumers, and a store that offers employees fair wages and benefits. We'll bring together in one location the kinds of high-quality products that, for example, the Star Bakery and the All-Star Dairy once offered right here in the Norwegian village. If this sounds good to you, we hope you'll join us as we create the community-owned grocery store of the future, the Androscoggin Food Co-op. A one-time investment of $200 makes you a member and owner of the co-op, and you can pay in 8 monthly installments of $25 if you prefer. You can get more information and join right on our website, androfood.coop. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.